is advised.
Hi, welcome to the Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV and Truth Frequency Radio. Deep sex talk is what we do here. America is a psychotic place. America is a place with many divided ideas about what it should be, what it's supposed to be, what it must be. It's split between a place called Jesus Land, which doesn't really exist, where people have morals and values that don't really exist, mostly relating to the total suppression of sexual identity, hatred of homosexuals, fear of the Jew, the black, the Mexican, the immigrant worker, the Muslim, and a liberal society which pretends that it's slightly more open-minded, but wants gays to be drugged and Jews to be funny, and doesn't look at what Israel does in Palestine, and doesn't ask any questions, not really, about politics or big events like 9/11 or vaccines or HIV or anything else. We have many garbage-headed fake conservatives, fake Christians in the country who beat their wives, who regularly have many multiple relationships with, tawdry bar whores. Nothing against tawdry bar whores, but, they do, and then they go home and convince their wives to be godly and to get on their hands and knees to show obedience, and you think I'm kidding, I'm not. We live in a country in which many people proclaim to be happily married, and they are pretty happy in the American sense of having enough money to buy shit and to pay the bills as they come in and to buy more shit and to put plastic on top of plastic on top of plastic. So we have that going for us. Most people proclaim to be strictly monogamous. Everybody watches other people having sex on television, on the internet, in movies, or they watch extraordinary amounts of violence, which somehow rechannels their sexual urge through some part of their basal ganglia or their lizard brain. You can understand the problems in the country by looking at two figures that I will talk about on this show. I grew up with one of them in the background as a comedian, and the other became a meaningless television celebrity for walking to a sandwich shop with no great visible talent except deciding to eat the stained cardboard sold by said sandwich shop daily. The first is Bill Cosby. I've been on many shows and imitated Bill Cosby because he's one of the fun people who imitate sweater, Jello pudding. We listened to Bill Cosby on records when I was growing up to almost get used to stand-up comedy. He was funny when you were 9 and 10 because his setups were good. They were, long. You could see him coming, Chocolate cake, and Dad said chocolate cake. If we're going to have chocolate cake, we want chocolate cake. Oh, and then Mom came in, and you fed him chocolate cake, and oh my God, well, there are eggs in chocolate cake. And, so you have the chocolate cake stand-up comedy, and it was okay if you're 9 or 10. And then you graduate immediately to, at least when I was a kid, to George Carlin, Robin Williams, and then real stuff like later George Carlin, or my teenage favorite was Richard Pryor, without a doubt, because he was the great undivider. He was the guy who could really exchange experiences black for white and make you feel human. Bill Cosby made you feel like Disneyland makes you feel. It gives you the idea that we're all in one place together, and that that's a good thing, and that the only real problems in the world can be solved in 22 minutes of a sitcom. He was rewarded for his ability to tell a joke, and he does have a sustained ability to hold a joke and hold an audience. He's a little aggressive, with the audience in the sense that he demands their attention. He's a good public orator. He's a good rhetorician. He's very bright. There's no doubt about that. And he always was, and he was very creative. He was on, I think, Sesame Street or the Electric Company, and then he was on Hey, it's Fat Albert. He had Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. He did the voices for some of those characters. He was on I Spy, in which he played a very different character than he'd ever play again. Very cool, very laid back, very James Bond. Probably more true to some aspects of his personality than his very goofy stuff later. He was, I think, a frequent guest of the Playboy Mansion. I have to say I think there. But I believe he was a frequent guest of the Playboy Mansion and hung out with the celebrities, the Angie Dickinsons and all the rest of the 70s. And then he was a huge star in the 80s. He made other people stars. He was the executive producer, I think, out of A Different World, and probably produced a number of other things that I don't know about. And you can look him up on IMDb or wherever you want to find out about him. He's been accused of sexual abuse, rape, drugging women by some 50 women. And I think a year or change ago, I was on some show and said, well, I can't, I'm not going to say that he's guilty because it seems to be a long time for people to remember, since the 1960s, for people to remember that this guy actually abused him. So I'm confused. Also, he's a politically charged figure in that he tried to buy into NBC. He's a black man, powerful black man. He chastised the black community for being high on gangster rap, having its some of the hip hop males or the gangster males having their belts around around their lower hips and all this kind of thing. And he said, shape up, grow up, all this kind of stuff. So he's been a controversial figure for years in the black community, in as much as there is a black community and as much as there is a white community. These are both mental constructs more than they really exist, because you live where you live. And if you live in Jacksonville, Florida, and you work there, where I worked, you get called nigger all the time. No, you heard what I said. White or black. Hey, nigger, what's up? I heard it all the time. Liam, nigger, what's up? And I'd say, Liam, you got to be more comfortable with the word. I was lectured about how not to say nigger, but to say nigga. And I said, I don't think I can say it either. I'm going to opt out. And if you live in some part of the South, you're going to hear so-called black talk. And if you live in the Northeast, you're going to hear it in Dorchester, where the white Irish gang members call each other's nigger all the time. So black and white in this country is a kind of a construct too. It has an historical basis in slavery, in chattel slavery, in the violent, constant abuse of anybody from Africa, sanctioned by the Catholic Church and all Christians, and then later protest by other Christians. That's funny. It's Barnum and Bailey world, isn't it? He went to Bill Cosby went to Temple University. He was a track star. He was an athlete. I don't think anybody would describe him as handsome in any way, but he certainly can command a room. And he's engaging and all this kind of thing. The 50 people who accuse him of sexual abuse have finally apparently gained the upper hand, and maybe they have a right to. We'll see. I don't believe anything I hear in the papers, and only a quarter of what I hear in court, because it's possible to lie. Anybody can go to court and lie. Again, he was trying to buy into NBC, and then his son was killed. And remember, he's a powerful black man, essentially insulting most of the black community all the time. So it wasn't a stretch for me to say that maybe he's being set up at the end of his life to be disgraced. So I had to consider that a possibility. There's so many people who, how do I say this? If 50 people come forward independently and say, look, you're up to no good, the chance that you're up to no good is fairly high. If 50 people who are not related to each other and don't work for the same pharmaceutical or military industrial complex come forward and independently corroborate similar behavior, it's going to be difficult for anybody to say, well, where there's smoke, there may be a fire. So I want to talk about that. And I want you to join me in that conversation. As you can tell, I will not be politically correct. As to Jacksonville, Florida, I had my version of a good time there in working for a little group called Mimi TV, and I had fun, and I learned a lot with the people there, and I had friends there, like Dee Dillinger, actually. Shout out to Dee Dillinger, who taught me the finer art of speaking down south isms. And you have to understand that when you live in a place, all the rules of racism and non-racism and political correctness go away. You simply live there, and the rules are the rules of the place. So black and white in this country are very much of a construct that has some real historical validity, but now lives in a different place of socioeconomic reality. The second character I'll talk about is this character called Jared Fogle from Subway, and occasionally weighed in on him, saying that I, again, only believe about a quarter of what I hear in courts because, court law is, it's hard to know what it means. And because when I read the details of his case, I was confused, and I'll get into that in the second half. Back to Bill Cosby. Is Bill Cosby funny? I think is a question nobody's asking right now. Well, it depends on what you mean by funny. He's not a great truth teller. He was a great rhetorician. He could really set you up for a joke, playing with and slightly against expectation. And the chocolate cake for breakfast is a pretty good example of that. The dad, he's left alone with the kids, and of course he's not the greatest parent in the world. Mother has a much better idea of how to parent the kids, so we're back to traditional, that is, Old Testament roles for men and women. He makes the joke by then saying that the kids wouldn't eat what he wanted, which was oatmeal or something healthy, and the little girl saw chocolate cake, and Daddy wants chocolate cake, and that was famous. Daddy wants chocolate cake, and he was, funny. And that was funny. And then so there was a whole, Dad is great, gives us chocolate cake, which we all sang when we were 9 or 10 years old, or maybe 11, listening to that album, Bill Cosby himself. He didn't talk about fucking anybody, as far as I recall. I don't think Bill Cosby has ever talked about fucking anybody. Bill Cosby has never talked about having sex, as far as I know, in any of his major acts, unless it was one of his famous deadpan looks in which he's intimating that something is happening. But he always refused to work what he called blue, and he was always very critical of Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy. Famously so. So much so that Eddie Murphy did a bit in his second huge blockbuster comedy. It wasn't Delirious, it was the next one. And he talked about getting a call from Bill Cosby. Hey, Eddie, you're funny, but you got to run in the blue, blee, blah, 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 soupity, shoopity, shoop. So Eddie Murphy imitates Bill Cosby, telling him not to curse. And so Eddie Murphy calls Richard Pryor, and Richard Pryor says, man, tell Bill to have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up. So he turns around and says, Bill, you're a sellout whore for corporations. Fuck you. It's a funny bit. Funny bit in the Eddie Murphy special. Very, very, very funny. Maybe the funniest joke in the whole thing. And he's a funny man. People don't remember how funny Eddie Murphy was. And how much he talked about sex, by the way, which Bill Cosby didn't approve of. Bill Cosby approved of putting his fake wife and kids. Watch. You could almost say that he's the progenitor of the idea of the black middle class being the same as the white middle class. In other words, he saw Leave It to Beaver, and he didn't think, what a bunch of fucking bullshit that is. Nobody acts like that. I don't believe that for a second. He didn't say, that's not true. That's not the way people really live. That's not the way we are. That's a lie. That's a programmatic lie coming out of the CIA 50s. That is not the way people are. People have sex, people are sexual, people are funny, people get into terrible fights, and they make up, and people kiss and hug, and people don't say, gosh, Dad, I'm a little confused. Well, son, Ward, I'm worried about the beaver. He put forward a model of black middle class that was consistent with the model of white middle class that was expressed in the Brady Bunch. In which things weren't very serious, in which things could be worked out with a little lecture by the secretly gay dad in the Brady Bunch and the wife who was making out on occasion with her eldest son. The actor who played her eldest son, or at least they had a date. In other words, he bought into the fraud of America and purveyed it for all of America to clap for him. I was always slightly nauseated watching. I didn't watch The Cosby Show by choice. It was on. And I lived with my father for a year and change before his psychopathic ex-wife essentially kicked me out for being a straight-A student. And, she was a narcissist, right? So she couldn't brook any competition to her egomaniacal worldview. So that's a real story in my life. But they would watch The Cosby Show, and then whatever was on after that, and then Cheers, and then Night Court. There was this huge, killer lineup that NBC had for years, and that really was done again when Seinfeld came out, and that was just a big deal that NBC had this killer TV lineup. I think it was on Thursday. I think it might have moved a couple of times. Cheers was the show that I enjoyed most of any show on the evening, because Cheers was sort of about real people having terrible real-world problems that really never got resolved, so it was funny. And it was sharper. The Cosby Show played into my father and stepmother's worldview, which was a construct of a family. You know, they put forward a construct. This isn't really how people are. But my stepmother, whatever, my father's second wife, was a clinical narcissist, a narcopath, an anorexic, bulimic, chain-smoking, emotionally schismed, emotionally violent, you know, nearly physically violent, but just too weak to do it. So she did it all with words in her head and just manipulated everybody around and got her to do everything she wanted to do by always feigning injury. And she's just a mess, you know, really a psychotic person. You know, later to be medicalized and maybe hospitalized and have all kinds of, but they didn't have that kind of stuff in the 80s, so she just got away with it. So she loved that show. And I think she made my father like it because it gave them this patina of respectability. It was a gloss on top of their narcissism or their failure to be honest. And they loved it. And I didn't love it. I never made jokes that I saw in it. The jokes were canned. I had already heard all the jokes in Bill Cosby himself. I mean, the whole first 2 years or 3 years of the show, well, I wouldn't know. But what I watched anyway before I was sort of out on my own, was a recapitulation of the stuff he did in his stand-up. And he would perform essentially for the actors in the stage with him, and they would be forced, Felicia Rashad would be forced to sort of laugh in appreciation for the great man and his humor. I don't know if you know Real Men and Women, but Real Men and Women don't, you know, it was like the girl at the end, the wife at the end of Welcome Back, Kotter would have to stand there while Gabe Kaplan would make jokes. It was shorter, and it was funny because we all knew that he was doing stand-up, and she would stand there, and he'd come up, Gabe Kaplan on Welcome Back, Kotter would come up and say, "Did I ever tell you about my Uncle Sammy?" And she'd like, "No." And you knew it was coming, like a 2.5-minute story for the run-out, the credits essentially of the show, and he would tell this joke, and she would just have to say, wah, wah. But the Cosby Show was all that for a while, until the actors sort of came into their own and developed lines of, you know, stories of their own and sort of could take some of the weight off of him, which, you know, he did share the stage with them. And then he made child stars out of a number of young actors, and, you know, I haven't heard any complaints from them. He's accused of having drugged women who he mentored, of groping women at events, of mostly being, though, a guy who would drug people who he was mentoring with strong drugs like Quaaludes and alcohol, and then violating them sexually, which is to say touching them sexually, very explicitly. And one of these cases is now going to court in some part of Pennsylvania, where just before the statute of limitations apparently ran out, somebody filed almost a Hail Mary, sorry to use a football reference, almost an 11th hour pass, an 11th hour thing to get it into court. So he's now been arraigned, and we'll see what happens. I won't speculate much on the outcome of a trial, except that he's ancient, will definitely draw pity, and shit's hard to prove, I guess. You know, it's easy to slander somebody in a court of opinion. In real life, this is why I initially balked at all of these accusations. I don't know anybody who. It's hard to say. There was a point in history when a woman was raped or violated, it's biblical that she almost earned it. You know, this is Old Testament stuff. It was her fault. It's Islam, it's Old Testament, it's fundamentalist Christianity. Well, you shouldn't have been dressing that way. Well, you shouldn't have been at his house. You know, he has a reputation. Bill Cosby. Let's do a little psychoanalysis. Let's say that it's all true. Let's do that. It's all true. Let's say it's all true. What does it tell us about somebody who could parade before the American public pretending to be the poster boy for the black middle class? The black middle class that's supposed to emulate the white middle class, never ask for reparations, never talk about the history of slavery, just act like America started in 1946 after we won World War II, or 1950-something when the segregation finally was ended enough, or 1960-something after we stopped fire hosing kids in Birmingham. Or last year, after we stopped shooting black kids on the street, let's pretend then that America has never been a racist country like Bill Cosby seems to want us to think. That seems to be the motion that he put forward. Let's pretend then that it's all true, and that he did what his accusers say he did. Well, now let's tell the truth. It is a racist country. It's always been a racist country. It's not just racist, it's biblical. It's not just sexist, it's biblical. It's not just anti-gay, it's biblical. This is what people misunderstand. This shit's all in the Bible. We're a biblical nation. We are a Christian nation, which means we're a Hebraic nation, which means we're an ancient Judaic nation. And the Islamic stuff's not any better, so don't get on your high horse. The Islamic people think that Moses was a real guy, and I guess they think Leviticus is true too, right? So it's all the same. Some of the things are different. One worships the moon, one worships the sun god, Jesus. The laws in the ancient Hebrew stuff are that women are essentially, conscribed to men. They're conscripts in the man's army of life. Herders are better than farmers. That's why Cain killed Abel, because, or was it Abel killed? Because the farmer wasn't as happy. The El Shaddai, the god of the mountain, wasn't as happy with the farmer's bounty as he was the herder's bounty. Well, that's not the way history actually panned out. History panned out that the farmers were more successful, were on more fertile land than the herders, and the herding people tended to be more violent people and marauding people who had to move from place to place constantly. The most successful people ever were the foragers, who combined small game and small animals with a lot of finding local foods. So we live in a world that's not racist, but biblical. We live in a world that's not sexist, but biblical. We live in a world that's not just anti-gay, but it's biblical. We do. What we call black people in this country are people who have African or, anywhere in the world where your skin's dark enough. We call you black. It doesn't really make any sense, because there are no black people. There are brown people, and there are tan people, and there are peachy tan people, and there are pinky tan people, and there are very whitish pink people. But there are no black people, and there are no white people. There are highly pink people. So the terms black and white are also a construct, and they're highly divisive. What we call black people in this country are, of course, from all parts of Africa, especially the parts that were used the most in the slave trade and the mass, essentially, pogroms, that brought people out of Africa to work the fields here, to build society, to build the structure of society. Bill Cosby doesn't really talk about that, and never did talk about that. He was Ward Cleaver. He was Mr. Brady. And like Mr. Brady, he was hiding a secret. Mr. Brady was gay. Ward Cleaver was hiding a secret. He wasn't Ward Cleaver. He wasn't the nice guy who came home with no emotions and said, "Well, June Cleaver, tell me what's wrong with the beaver. What's wrong with your beaver, June? Nothing a good talk and a lifesaver can't fix." There's actually, I remember there was a Happy Days, which sometimes winked at the 50s and sometimes played it up. Father Cunningham, I can't remember what his name was, with the father, Tom Bosley, was talking to Richie Cunningham, as the director, Ron Howard, and Richie Cunningham was upset about some chick or something like that. I thought she liked me, and she didn't like me, and she treated me badly. And the dad's talking to the son, and I swear to God, I'm at the end, the father goes to the son, "Here, have a lifesaver." And the audience loses its mind. Like, it's the greatest joke ever, because it was an advertisement. Like, they were playing against the advertising of America, like a lifesaver, a little hard candy can make you actually feel much better. And that's the same thing as having somebody really be kind to you. So the Cosby Show purveyed a notion of blackness that was more nuanced in many ways. He brought in jazz people, he brought in famous actors, famous musicians, other celebrities for minor roles. He played a doctor, a respectable position, I think an OBGYN, if I don't have that mistaken. Oh my God. I think a gynecologist or an OBGYN, somebody who helped women give birth. Ha ha, funny, funny. Never mind that doctors are some of the chief murderers in the country. Never mind that they cause autism with their vaccines. Never mind that they kill people all the time with the drugs that they prescribe. Never mind that they're held immune from it. Maybe it was a good role. for him to play. Maybe it's something that he secretly wanted to be. He certainly sucked up all the fake doctorates that he could. Now, he's accused now of being a narcissist and somebody who did whatever he wanted. He's accused for following famous women around all day and, grabbing one of their breasts. And when one of them argued, she said, "No, I had a right to do that." Maybe he's just an Old Testament guy. And maybe he tried to make the American dream come true for himself by playing the role that he felt that he must have deserved. By playing the Old Testament guy who gets to do what he wants. And if you wonder why I sometimes feel a little anti-religious, it's because nothing good ever came out of the Old Testament. And nothing good ever really came out of the New Testament, because the New Testament is an invocation of the Old Testament, saying everything in there is good and remember to love each other sometimes, and if you're not with us, we'll kill you. Not really high on religion. Not really high on it. And Bill Cosby was the model for Old Testament behavior. The absolute model for good old American Levitical Ten Commandment values. He played a monogamous, loyal, loving husband on TV. And in reality, I'm not going to say he was a rapist, because I don't know that. But his wife even says he's a serial philanderer. I think we'd be a better nation and a healthier nation if we admitted that we should be talking about sex a little bit differently. That we should talk about it as though it were a basic human function that we all had to perform with consent among agreeing adults, for fuck's sake. So that Christians couldn't hold it over your head that that gays or Jews or whoever they're picking on in any particular moment aren't as good as they are. Because, yeah, I've seen behind your closed doors. This is the Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV and Truth Frequency Radio. Coming up to the break, please support independent journalism by buying official stories on Amazon.com. And we're in the 3-minute run-out groove here on UCY TV. Welcome to the Liam Scheff Show. Thanks very much for joining us. Let's do a little advertisement for yours truly. I'm in the middle of writing my new book. The new book is called Fisher Stories 2. How original. Fisher Stories 2 is going to be all about the myths of America. Yes, the myths of America. Myth America, in fact. If Official Stories was about all the lies we were taught in school, then Official Stories 2, Myth America, is about the stories that we were taught before we got to school and every day when we walk around. It's about the stories that are too big to fit in a textbook. It's about the myths of monogamy, of lifelong perfect marriage. It's about the myth that Moses was a real guy, that Charlton Heston played in the movie that we saw on TV. It's about the myth that Jesus was a real guy who had 4 different stories written about him, who's going to come back and save us all, unless, if we believe in him, and kill us all if we don't. It's about the myth of American superiority. Yes, America, the great white nation on the hill, that can do no wrong. No, what's right underneath that? Well, it's the imperial myth. It's the myth of super sovereignty granted to us by the worship of the Hebrew notion of being the chosen nation and the chosen people. And right underneath that, what do we have? We have the oil state. And with that oil state, we've been able to ride over any technological hurdle that we wanted to. We've been able to turn living soil into dead soil and spray it with gasoline byproducts, oil byproducts, to make it produce sterilized food that we now pump into ourselves and kill ourselves daily by the mouthful. Official Stories 2 is going to be about the myths that make America what she is. And I hope you look forward to it. I intend to have it out by spring, no later than early summer, but certainly working on it hard, dutifully, reading, writing, and keeping the same tone that makes Official Stories so readable. Yes, it's an informal tone. I'm directly addressing you. I'm cutting out all the excruciating quotes and footnotes and all the stuff to make you think that I'm telling you the 100,000% truth. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, look, here's the stuff that I read. It's in the back of the book. You can go find it. And now I'm going to tell you the story of what it looks like to me. You don't have to trust me, but you can if it sounds logical to you upon further reading. And if you don't want to believe what I say, look, here's the link. Go look it up and see if what I'm saying makes sense. This is the Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV. We're coming right back up to the break. We're going to continue this undiluted talk about America's sexual problems. Welcome back to the Liam Scheff Show on Truth Frequency Radio, UCY TV, and wherever finer watches are sold. Bill Cosby. Maybe he is the perfect model of the American male, the purveyor of Old Testament values. Shall we put it that way? He's the idealization of Old Testament values. He gets to do what he wants. He gets to, maybe there was some part of his mind that rationalized it. Well, I'm in a racist system and I'm standing up for my whole people, so I'll take what is mine. There are many, there will be biography after biography, social, psychological analysis made one after the other, and I'm sure many of them will touch upon the idea that he is a narcissist and he felt that he was owed this constant favor of not having to ask permission for sex, if it turns out to be true. Whether it turns out to be true or not, I guarantee that's one of the theses is it, that'll be put forward, one of the ideas that'll be put forward to describe him. But I'm just going to say that he's clearly an Old Testament kind of guy. Another figure who made the papers this year is named Jared. He's not somebody I think anybody really followed, but he had a TV career for having been very fat, and then going to this terrible Subway restaurant chain, just excruciating, grotesque food, lunch meats, full of nitrates and all, just disgusting nitrates, full of disgusting food, on sugary, stinky, horrifying bread with disgusting just not. It's all my opinion, of course, but it's disgusting to me. And he says he lost whatever he lost. Forgive me, I don't know, 100, 200, whatever it was. Huge volume of weight by walking to his local Subway, which I hope was some matter of miles away, and eating one of their sandwiches and walking back. So he was able to finally curb his portion problem by doing that. Well, it turns out he had another portion problem, and that portion problem had to do with something that wasn't on the menu at Subway, namely punani. He liked young, like Woody Allen, young women. I don't know if he liked girls, but he liked young women. He was tried and sentenced, and I think is still in sentencing or negotiation for having sex with a number of people, but the criminal charge that's made the papers is one that might provoke you to ask some questions, because he had sex with prostitutes. Now, if you say he had sex with prostitutes, you can understand some, minor charge. It depends on where you are in the country, of course. But clearly it's consensual. The problem is that the prostitutes were, I think by the newspapers, telling 16 and 17 years old. Now, I don't know if you've been around the block any time, and by around the block I mean around the world, but if you, or around history, but if you look at 16 and 17 years old, you know that you're talking about a teenager. Teenager is different than a child. It's also different than an adult. It's something in between. You could call it a young adult, maybe. You're stretching a little bit. 20s is more young adult. 19. Nevertheless, this isn't a child, so why is he going to jail? Well, he also collected hundreds. I think the number that I saw finally in the paper was 600. I didn't know the first time I read it through. Items of what are called child pornography. Well, if you look up the definition of child pornography, you're met with another confusing concept. And the definition of child pornography is, again, anybody under 18. Maybe let's just get this out of the way. this Jared fellow may have had clearly has some problems. There's enough free nakedness on, if you just take off Google safe search and type in pussy or vagina, you're just going to get an endless hit. It's just endless. There's just endless supply of women, for some reason, taking naked pictures of themselves for reasons I don't know why, because apparently, I don't know if they're getting paid. It's just right there on Google. Why he had to go to any extra lengths to find nudity is confusing to me. But he did. And I don't know what his taste was, because the problem is the newspaper didn't say. It just, it's anything under 18. It could be 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds. That would be his business. Now, you can call him a pedophile for that, but he would be a teenophile. Let's be very specific about that. He's a teenophile. In other words, he's into teenagers. He's 38, and he's probably been doing this for 10 years. Let's get this out of the way. Jared used to be very fat. Very, very fat people have eating disorders. Very, very fat people with eating disorders have extraordinary emotional problems underneath the eating problem. Did it occur to anybody that he might have been very fat because he had an extraordinary childhood full of abuse? Because he himself might have been extraordinarily abused in secret and never talked about it? I don't know. Nobody's curious about that, because he had sex with prostitutes and had some pictures. A lot of pictures. So he gets to go to jail. His defense, by the way, is something about how losing the weight gave him sexual horniness and opportunities he never had before. So whatever, he's just playing the system like everybody does. And the system is playing him. Let's say that he's a problematic guy. And that in my world, if I ran the zoo, he'd be in therapy. I don't know what's in the pictures. And he'd be out of reach of teenagers, schoolyards, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd give him a little tattoo somewhere, up on his head that said something like, "I'm a jackass." It would just say something like that. "I'm a jackass." Just a little, if you were close enough to get to know him, it would say, "Why do you have that 'I'm a jackass' thing on you?" "Well, I had 600 pictures of naked teenagers." "Why did you do that?" "I don't know." On the other hand, and I don't want to defend him, but let's say that if he actually had pictures of children, he's more than a jackass. Let's say then he gets a tattoo that says, "I'm disturbed." And he has to walk around with a tattoo on his head that says, "I'm disturbed." "Why do you have a tattoo that says I'm disturbed?" "Well, because I had pictures of children." "What were they doing? Were they naked?" "Yeah, they were naked." "What were they doing?" "Nothing. They were just standing there." Which begs the question, were these pictures procured for Jared's own amusement, or were they like the woman who developed a photo of her own kid in giving a sink bath or something like that got flagged by the Walgreens developing people for FBI and Homeland Security, so that she had the FBI at her doorstep as she was, raising her kids, just for having a picture of a kid in a bath, which most parents at some point, "Oh, are you cute in the bath with your tub?" And it's most people don't look at children and they're wildly undeveloped, and think anything but, "Oh, it's a kid." Most people don't think that. The people who do think that probably are troubled, and that's what I want to talk about in this segment. Americans don't talk about sex. And because we don't talk about sex and we think sex is shameful, we don't tell young people the truth about sex. And this is the truth about sex. Sex is great. It's great. It's mind-fucking-blowingly great. You'll never have a better experience than making love, ever. Ever. I don't care what you do. I don't care what mountains you climb. I don't care what helicopters you parachute out of. I don't care if you climb K2 or Half Dome or whatever you're into. It's not better than the new Star Wars. It's not better on getting to read the script to episode 8 today. Sex and loving sex and passionate sex and making love is better than any experience you'll have in your life. Once you get to that point that you know how to enjoy it, that you slow down enough, that you're present with the person you're with, that you love and care, at least care about the person you're with very much, and that you're present, you're very much with him or her in that moment, or if you're very experimental, with them. But I dare say that sex with one person in an intimate setting is going to be the height of your sexual experience. That one-to-one, chakra to chakra, heart to heart, mouth to mouth, sex organization. It's monumental when it's right. Sometimes it's perfunctory. Sometimes it's you're just horny and you bang it out. And sometimes you kind of regret it and you look back and go, shit, that wasn't the right person. In those rare moments that you find the right person and you're in the right situation and you're right there with each other, it's the best thing you'll ever do. And you'll dream about it, you'll write poetry about it in your head or on paper or wherever you write your poetry. You'll listen to songs that remind you of it, and you'll desperately want to be in touch with the person who made you feel that way. I dare say that Jared of Subway hasn't had that experience, and I certainly don't know if Bill Cosby has had that experience, because you have to be intimate with somebody, which means you have to be listening to them, him or her. So I don't think that having sex with a prostitute in a hotel room, whatever her age, 40 or 71 or 17, is the same height. I think then you're exploring something else, and we're going to get to that. Americans don't talk about sex. We don't know that sex is great, and that it's great when it's with somebody you're actually connected to, and you're willing to be connected to, and you're willing to take a journey with. That's when it's truly great. Otherwise, it can be okay. And some people have said sex is never bad. It's like pizza. It's always okay. It's not true. Pizza can be bad, and sex can be awful. If you're with somebody you're not supposed to be with, or you don't truly love, or is somebody you just end up not liking at all, you regret it. You feel like, oh God, why did I give that little connection away? And you regret it, so you don't do it again. Your life goes on. But Americans don't talk about sex honestly, and we certainly don't tell the teenagers the truth about sex, and we don't tell children the truth about sex. And children, the truth about sex is you have something that if you rub it, you'll probably feel excited. So you can do that. You're allowed to do that. Nobody else can do that to you, but you're allowed to do that. Of course, in other countries, you can write your complaints to the country of origin, not to me. In other tribes, sexual stimulation is something that people do with each other in age groups their whole lives long. People in other tribes, in other parts of the world, stimulate each other, excite each other, as young people with young people, teenagers with teenagers, and older people with older people, and sometimes teenagers with older people, and young adults with older adults, and so on. And that's part of their tribal custom. We pretend, though, that all sexual stimulation occurs after marriage, which is amusing. And so we don't tell the truth to teenagers, which is by about 13, most boys are going to be pretty horny. By about 14, almost everybody in the teen years is going to be horny. By 15, it's on. By 16, half of the population's had sex, and by 17, the other half is catching up. So we don't tell kids, you're going to want to have, as you get older, you're going to want to have these experiences. You're going to want it desperately. And the minute you start bumping and grinding with each other, you're going to be so horny, you're not going to be able to stop yourself. But here's what you have to know. It does feel good, but here are a few secrets, a few tips. Number one, if you're a boy, you're going to have to masturbate. We have to have a better word for it, self-pleasure, whatever you want to call it. You're going to have to go to the holodeck and release the hounds. You're going to have to go wink, wink, wink. Because if you try to fool around with somebody, whether you're gay and it's a boy, whether you're heterosexual and it's a girl, whether you try to fool around with somebody you're into, and you haven't released the hounds, you're going to explode. You're not going to have any staying power. You're not going to be able to enjoy the experience. So no boys are taught this. We're all taught masturbation is gay. Masturbation makes you weak. Bullshit. Masturbation makes you last longer during sex. Thank you. You can send your thanks in the back of a $100 bill to Liam Scheff, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, etc., etc. Because I've just saved your sex life for the rest of your life. Masturbate before you have sex. I don't mean right before. I mean 3-4 hours before, earlier in the day. Clear out the pent-up juices of the pent-up humors of the lower body, as a medieval monk might say. We don't tell people this. We don't tell boys, you better be really focused on your girlfriend's pleasure because you are going to take 38 seconds and she's going to take 38 minutes if you're lucky in the beginning. And she may not have an orgasm because she's got to feel very comfortable. She's got to really feel like she trusts you, which means you can't be a total fucking asshole. And you can't just not play an asshole. You actually have to be a decent guy, which takes a little bit more energy than most narcissists are willing to put forward. They're willing to play the nice guy, but as soon as they don't get their way, they're an asshole. Which is what America teaches us all to be, by the way. So congratulations, most of America. You're a bunch of assholes. You can grow out of it, by the way. You can ask yourself to. So we don't tell young people the truth about sex, which is you're really going to want to enjoy sex. And we don't tell girls, you are going to be responsible for your own orgasm. You'd better learn to be responsible for your own orgasm. You're not there to please the guy. You're not there to get him off quickly. Or better yet, let me put it this way. Before he ever gets into your body, you better make sure he has released the hounds. You understand what I'm saying. I'm not, yeah. Anyway, uncorked the bottle, and then peed and washed and gotten rid of all the sperm that can still be viable and stuff like that. So you got to go through all of these processes. If you're the girl, make sure that the guy does this long before he gets anywhere near the inside of you. Make sure his hands are washed. Teach him how to use his lips and kiss well, because eventually that skill will come in handy in the lower equatorial regions. That's an oral sex hint. We might even teach teenagers that, as much as it disgusts Middle America, that oral sex is probably a better solution to sexual frustration than is penetrative sex, because you can learn what each other's genitals look like and how they operate with your more active eyes and mouth than you can with your rather mute sex organs. That, boys have to learn how females work, and females have to learn how men work. We all have to learn how the opposite sex works, and we don't do that because we're told that sex is wrong. And so we run away from our parents and we make out with somebody and we have the first experience, and it's so exciting. We go back and we look at our parents and we think, you've lied to us our whole lives. You've lied to us. Why should we ever believe anything you say? And then our parents go, oh my God, I'm putting you on the pill, and never go anywhere without a condom, and okay, all right, you're on the pill, and here's the HPV shot because you're probably just fucking everybody. So you you damage your kids, and nobody tells the truth. You're going to enjoy sex, but sex is a little bit dangerous. Why? Because you can have a baby. The sperm is the viable thing, Yeah, there's some STDs. You keep on the lookout for those. Don't buy into all the propaganda. Keep for the lookout. Talk to your partner. Have you ever had a big red bumpy sore? Have you ever had something that leaked pus out of talk to me. And be more willing to use hands and mouths in the early parts of sexual experience and exploration, and really talk. Like, does that feel good? Do you like that? I guarantee Bill Cosby nobody ever said, Bill, you better ask people if they like something. Back to Jared. I don't know exactly what's wrong with him, and here's one of the problems. Because we don't teach teenagers about sex, somebody like Jared grows up fat and unloved and unliked and doesn't have sex, and then he ends up in a position of some respectability for having been fat and gone to Subway. Whatever makes you popular in America, God help you. And then he suddenly has money and patina of respect, and somebody marries him, and he realizes he has all these crazy fantasies that he's never done anything with, so he starts looking at pictures. Maybe he was abused, maybe he was punched, maybe he was hit, maybe he was violently, serially molested and never talked about it, like most people in America who don't talk about the fact that they were abused when they were abused. So we have a nation of people running around with scars that they don't allow, but the whole culture, that Judeo-Christian, Hebraic, Levitical culture, makes normal sexual impulses seem deranged. So if young people, and I mean 13, 14, are turned on by each other, 15 certainly, come on, at 14, try to remember how horny you were, boys. 13, remember the jokes you started making about how the girls suddenly had breasts and you couldn't stop thinking about them? By 15, it was just obvious. Everybody was trying to make out with everybody. Well, but because we don't just say, yeah, that's actually true, we coat it in layers of drama and shame, and maybe he just never got to grow up. Maybe he had other problems. I don't know. I'm not here to read his tea leaves or excuse him of anything like that. He's got his own problems, and for some reason he decided to collect hundreds and hundreds of pictures of underage people. Underage being under 18. Let's talk about that. If you travel around... let's say that the culture also forbids young people who might be gay or bisexual from exploring that, so they feel like they're perverts and deviants, and so they don't experience that part of their life. They walk around living half lives in a half glow, terrified to tell the people that they do love that they have these other impulses. Like, yeah, I like you, but I'm also sort of attracted to him over there. Or, yeah, I like her, but I'm also attracted to him. Yeah, I like you, but I'm also attracted to her over there. So, sorry, I didn't make that clear. The first him was supposed to be a him who's attracted to a her, but also him. And the second was supposed to be a her who's attracted to her, but a him, but also a her. Anyway, we're not supposed to say these things because we're not supposed to, but most psychologists would agree that some portion of people are pretty bisexual and some larger portion are kind of slightly bisexual, and the majority of us under certain circumstances are a little bit. Doesn't mean you ever have to do anything about it, and I think even the term bisexual is off-putting because it somehow indicates, the act of sex, the penetrative act, when really it's just maybe an artistic appreciation, an aesthetic appreciation for the form of the human body. We don't even allow that. Everything has to be sexual, and everything sexual has to be about intercourse instead of being about appreciation or beauty. We lose all context. We lose all shades of gray and all hues of color in America. We don't have it. We don't allow it. We don't allow these conversations. So somebody, by the way, I guarantee that everybody who was in a rock band in the 1960s broke every one of the laws that Jared of Subway broke. Just saying. I mean John, Paul, George, Ringo, and every member of Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones. Every one of them did. Every one of them dated 16 and 17-year-olds when they were in their 20s. Every frickin' one of them did. At least they dated young women. They dated young women like that when they were 19 and 20. They just did. They had so many groupies throwing themselves at them. It was just a running joke. Read Hammer of the Gods if you want, the Led Zeppelin saga. Look up Jimmy Page. He would have been in jail. Some people would have thrown the book at him like a Roman Polanski, except he didn't do anything against anybody's will. But he was married to a 14-year-old for a while. Look it up. Look it up. Whole lot of love. The world is different than you think, and people are sexual at a certain age, and they're not sexual under a certain age. They're not really sexual under a certain age. They're just more. They live in their world. This is the thing that I frankly wish pedophiles would figure out. Kids aren't interested in sex. They're not interested in sex. They may be interested in the sensations of their own bodies. They may be curious as to what their little same-age friends look like. I'll show you yours if you show you mine. But they're genuinely not interested. I wasn't. Anyway, speaking for all children, we're not interested in sex at any particular age before the age of whenever it hits us, 13, 14, 15. I wasn't ready for any kind of true sexual. I was ready for kissing by 12, 13. Not heavy. Heavier kissing by 14. Booby and other kinds of stuff by 15, and certainly sex by 16. I was ready. But that was my progression, and I think that's fairly typical. So what is it about... Jared had sex with a 16 and a 17-year-old, and he had pictures of people whose ages will never be determined. But let's say they were also 16 and 17. Well, let's just say they were 16 and 17. No idea if it's true. It won't hold up in any kind of thing. I'm just saying, let's say. Let's say there were 15, 16, 17, 18, 15, 16, 17, and 18 pictures that he had. Just hold on. Hold on. Don't go around the world. And they weren't pictures of people having sex. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, they were just pictures of people being naked. I think there's a Blind Faith album cover from somewhere in the 60s of somewhere like a 12 or 13-year-old girl standing without a shirt. It's not very sexual, She's just staring at the camera. And I remember seeing it when I was a kid, and I didn't know if it was a girl or a boy. That's exactly how much it impacted me. But I think that would be illegal now. The cover of Houses of the Holy, another Led Zeppelin cover, is all these young naked girls climbing up this altar, the stone altar of some sort. That would never get made now. It's kind of a piece of art, but never mind. It's clearly a violation of everything important in the world. I don't know. Let's talk about actual reality. In Europe, the age of sexual consent is pretty young from the American point of view, unless you're in some of the southern states or Utah. I think it's 14 in places like Austria, 15 in like France, 15 and 16 seem to be the norm. And I remember that I was in Scandinavia for a period of time, and I was traveling, and this is 20 years ago, and I was looking at their Parade magazine, sort of their Sunday newspaper insert, right? It's their Sunday insert, and I open it, and I'm looking through the gossip about the Queen and celebrities and whoever was famous at the time, the cast of Friends, and there in the middle, I opened it, I just stopped, and I'm looking around this kitchen full of, my friend was there and her family, and I look at them, and I look back, and I look at them, and I look back. I'm waiting for somebody to come over and tell me what I'm looking at. And I look again, and it's clearly pictures of like 2-inch square or 1.5 by 2, whatever it was. It was 30 pictures on a page of naked teenagers that they had sent in themselves, that their brothers, mothers, sisters, and fathers had taken while they were sitting in the kitchen or on a picnic bench or on a picnic blanket. And they were naked, topless, bottomless. They weren't posing hustler style. They were just sort of posing in a slightly cheesecakey, arch your back, that kind of thing. And I said to the girl I was seeing, what the fuck is going on here? What is this? She said, oh, yeah, those are local girls. They want to get their picture in the paper. Sorry? Excuse me? Yeah, those are local girls. They want to get their picture. And so they send in these pictures of them. And I said, but they're naked. She said, yeah, they're naked. My emphasis was, but they're naked. Like, this is a sin and a crime. How do you allow this? And her emphasis was, oh, yeah, they're naked, which is a natural thing to be sometimes. Sometimes people are naked. In fact, we go to the beach half naked all the time. And of course, breasts are pretty, so they're proud of their breasts because they're developing. And they've developed, and they look great. So they look great, and they're going to show them before they become hanging pendulum down to their knees. They're going to show them. So the culture that you're in is going to put a very different emphasis on what you call pornography or how you think of nudity. And I think that that's something that Americans aren't really ever going to understand in a group, because we're so biblical and so infused by the idea that women are the harlot that drives us to distraction, that they are the whore by the side of the harlot by the side of the road that leads us to temptation, instead of understanding that sex is something that's consensual between two people and isn't necessarily intercourse, but is a series of conversations, that is a feeling of affection between two people that can manifest in 100 different ways. I think it would be a better world if people like Bill Cosby or Jared of Subway had been instructed in this notion of sexuality, of an acceptable, consensual, you don't have to go all the way to the goal, all the way to the finish line, but sex is normal, and your sexual impulses to find other people attractive are normal. Put the emphasis on consent, on communication with the other person. And I believe that all of these problems just disappear from the face of the earth. But we live in an Abrahamic society, whether you're Islamic or Jewish or Christian, or even many of the Hindus, even though they're not Abrahamic. We live in a male-dominated herding society, which says that women have very few rights in conjunction with designating the direction of their sex lives. This is the Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV and Truth Frequency Radio. We're coming up against the break. On UCY TV and Truth Frequency Radio, stay tuned to all the great programming. Well, that was instructive. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Liam Scheff Show. This is the UCY Runout Groove. What did we learn today? We learned that religion is the source of, well, not all evil in the world, but certainly a great many misunderstandings about what we are. We've talked about that before. We learned that Bill Cosby was a great Old Testament kind of guy. That Jared of Subway should have learned, I don't know, maybe to be more accepting of something when he was younger, so he didn't have to go back and revisit it after the fact. I don't know. We learned that Americans are incredibly uncomfortable with adult conversations about something that we all are, which is the sexual creature. We learned that teens shouldn't be put in jail for dating teens, but that happens too, actually. That teens can be investigated and have criminal charges filed against them for taking pictures of themselves, which they send to some friend of theirs. That's happened. We've learned that the world doesn't make much sense unless you're somebody who wants it not to make sense because you collect money from either the court system or some other calamity that we call justice in America and the rest of the world. We learned that you can buy Official Stories by Liam Scheff on Amazon.com. It's in a corrective textbook to all the lies you were taught in school, all the lies I was taught in school too. We've learned that Official Stories 2 is coming out this year. This coming year, 2016, in a couple of days, in a day. What day is it? Oh, God, it's already 2016. Never mind. We learned that Official Stories 2 is coming out this year. Redundant. That it's about the myths of America, that it's about Myth America. Yes, Official Stories 2, Myth America, coming to a store near you very, 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 very soonish. We learned that Myth America is about the stuff that is bigger than the school book. Yeah, these are the lies that got to us when we were very young, and they're consistently reinforced all the way through our lives. We've learned that you can support independent journalism by going to my PayPal page. Just go to liamscheff.com, or my Face Hump page, Facebook, or any of the other pages that I forget to maintain. There's a PayPal link there on the YouTube page too, and on my webpage. Go and donate